it can be a hard balance to strike sometimes because you're like, you get, 5 more projects tomorrow, then you gotta, like, that's great, fantastic. But then we also have to make sure that we have the workforce to manage all of that. I mean, it's a constant flux in and out, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious though. We talked about it a little bit, but I want to dive a little bit more into like your sales background here. So, in an industry, particularly in New York, with like so many, like there's like smaller players, and there's like some really really big players out there too. I mean, how have you managed selling in your work when like the relationship and reputation is just so key?
That's a really good question, and people often ask me this, and I sometimes ask myself, how did we get in touch with so many great and fantastic people in New York? And I think it comes down to obviously to the relationships. How do
Yeah.
you build relationships? How do you maintain relationships? I read a book, and I think you know this, and probably a lot of our in our audience, How to Win Friends and Influence
Yep.
People, or how to win friends and influence people by Dale Carnegie. It's
Yep.
been very impacting on me, lasting on me. It's these people I reach out to, I don't try to sell them stuff in step one. I just want to get to know them.
Yep.
I want to start building up a relationship with them and understanding what they need and understanding how we could help. And building a friendship essentially is
Yeah.
what I'm trying to achieve, and it's been going pretty well. So a lot of our clients are actually people I spend time with outside of the office. We go for runs in Central Park. We discuss opportunities over dinner. We do all these fantastic things outside of the workplace, and I think that's been something that is very key to my sales approach. Is business is one thing, humans dealing with humans is the other thing. And if the human can deal with the human, then I think everything else just will follow. And that's been very, very important to how I approach and how I build and maintain relationships.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and I think really what you're talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it feels like what you're talking about is coming from abundance, right? Where really, like when you're sitting down at closing table or first introduction with somebody, you want to see if you're able to help provide a service to them, right? And obviously, we're running a business, so we got to make sure that we are out, closing deals, of course. But if you come from a place where you are, again, like service first, I think I mean, it's so much better than the alternative. And I'm a big believer. I'm not sure if I was talking to you about it, Kevin, but have you read The Challenger Sale? Are you familiar with that at all?
I did not, but I'll put it on my bucket list.
So that's, I mean, that one's, I'm a huge fan of that one because I mean, it's very, very sales data driven. And it talks about like the different forms of, salesmen and all that kind of stuff. But my favorite takeaway from that is like when we're talking about relationships, particularly in the sales world, I think like this book says that the folks that have had the most success are, yes, the people that are building relationships, but that top, the upper echelon of sales, like that top, 10 or 1%, those are the folks that are willing to push back a little bit. And I always think that like people can sometimes feel uncomfortable with pushing back on a potential client. Like you don't want to upset them, but you also want to show that you are out for their best interest at the end of the day. And I mean, it's kind of like when we're talking about like personal relationships, like I mean, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that if, maybe your wife was, displeased with you in some way, she would probably push back on you a little bit, right? Saying like, hey, Kevin, we can't be acting like this, right? And I think that's true, just as true as in the sales world. When we're talking about challenging somebody, just push back on them and saying like, hey, based on what you've told me, X, Y, and Z, I would really strongly suggest going with option one as opposed to option two. Do you feel like that's true in what you've experienced too?
I agree. I agree. We often get told that here in New York City we're the crazy Germans with the crazy ideas, and you must be out of your minds designing buildings the way you design them. And that's the pushback that we get from some of these clients that we're working with. They're like, this will never work. And we tell them, well, it will work. We have been designing these across the Atlantic, and we have a lot of experience, and we we did many mistakes in the past, and we went through that learning curve today already, and we know that it works. And we have to, as you said, look for the best financial and technical approach and pathway for our clients. And some things they just haven't seen yet that exists in the market. They might heard of it, but they haven't seen it. And I think that's the pushback we're getting. But as you described, we're looking out for their best interest. And that's why we do need to push back and tell them this will work. There's other opportunities.
Yeah.
Innovation is risky. We understand it. But without innovation, there's no opportunity to